Welcome to the Assembly Committee on Legislative Operations and Elections. Will the Secretary please call the roll?
Assemblymember Cole.
Here.
Assemblymember Dickman.
Here.
Assemblymember Edgeworth.
Present.
Assemblymember Gonzalez.
Here.
Assemblymember Hibbets.
Here.
Assemblymember Hardigy. Assemblymember Miller.
Here.
Assemblymember Monroe Marino. Assemblymember Moore.
Here.
Assemblymember Nadeem.
Present.
Chair Mosca.
And I am here. And if you could please mark our members here as well as they arrive. Thank you. Welcome to the audience in Carson City. We are in our actual room. Great to see you. Thank you to those joining by video conference in Las Vegas and those listening over the internet. Thank you for being here for Legislative Operations and Elections. So before we begin, I'll make several housekeeping items as a reminder. Please silence your electronic devices. If you wish to testify, please sign in at the table by the door and provide a business card to the committee secretary. When testifying, please turn on the microphone and clearly state your name and affiliation, if any, for the record. Then turn off the microphone each time you're done speaking. There are hard copies of the meeting materials available for members of the public. Members of the public may also access electronic copies of the materials on the Nevada Legislature's website. Public comment will be taken at the end of the meeting. Each person will be limited to 2 minutes. In addition, the public may submit written testimony to the committee up to 24 hours after the meeting. We do expect courtesy and respect in our interactions during the meeting, even if we may not agree with one another's positions. Committee members will be using their laptops to view handouts and other documents, so please do not view that as a sign of inattention or disrespect. So first today, members, our first item of business is the introduction of a few committee bill draft requests. Members, please note that a vote in favor of introducing a BDR does not imply a commitment to support the measure later. All this action does is allow the BDR to become a bill and enter the legislative hearing process. It does not imply commitment to support final passage. So first, we will introduce BDR 24-360. This measure is sponsored by the Assembly Committee on Legislative Operations and Elections, and it revises provisions relating to voter registration. I will entertain a motion to introduce BDR 24-360.
So moved.
I have a motion from Vice Chair Gonzalez. Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a second from Assemblymember Hadigi. Any discussion on the motion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? The motion carries. Thank you. Next, we will introduce BDR 24-362. This measure is sponsored by the Assembly Committee on Legislative Operations and Elections, and it revises provisions relating to election workers. I will entertain a motion to introduce BDR 24-362.
So moved.
I have a motion from Vice Chair Gonzalez. Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a second from Assemblymember Monroe Moreno. Any discussion on the motion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say nay. The motion carries. Thank you, committee members. Okay, great. So next we'll move on to receive an overview of state legislatures and trends in legislative operations across the state. So of course, we are legislative operations and elections, but we have heard a lot about elections. We thought it would be important to hear a little bit about the legislative operations part. And we're fortunate to be joined by Julie George, the director of the Center for Legislative Strengthening at the National Conference of State Legislatures. So with that, Ms. George is attending our meeting via Zoom. Thank you for being here today. We saw you on the screen earlier. And feel free to begin when you are ready. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Can you guys hear me okay? Everything good?
Yes, thank you so much.
Okay. Madam Chair, members of the committee, it's nice to be here today. My name is Julie George. I am the director of the Center for Legislative Strengthening for the National Conference of State Legislatures. And the Center for Legislative Strengthening is the small but mighty team at NCSL that looks at the institution and operations of legislatures. So I'm excited to be here today to just share some of the trends that we're seeing, both through the research requests that our team receives, and also just, through what we're our own just research and monitoring of legislatures. So I'm going to spend most of my time on these three topics. Do you see the slideshow?
Thank you. We do
Oh,
not
no.
see the slideshow. AVH, can we make sure?
That's because I didn't share.
Oh, okay.
Apologies.
There you go.
Okay. I knew I forgot something.
Okay, we see it now. Thank you so much.
Now you see it. Okay, my apologies. Boy, I've gotten rusty with the virtual format. Okay, so good. So I'm going to spend most of the time on these three topics. So kind of the legislature typology, full-time, part-time, hybrid, legislator compensation, and then also on constituent relationship management software. But let's see here. There are a lot more trends that we see through my team. So I just want to quickly touch on a few of these. Probably comes as no surprise that AI is a hot topic at legislatures. So my team member, Will, who I think actually has probably some of you have heard from before, he is keeping track of the use of AI by legislatures, how it's being regulated, if it's being allowed to be used. So that is something that we're seeing a lot of at NCSL. The government efficiency and modernization is a piece that we're seeing quite a bit about. There are many states with efforts. You're going to hear a little bit more. New Mexico is undergoing a big effort. They've looked at staffing and compensation. Kansas has looked at technology. Wisconsin, they had a big push. They created their first ever centralized HR office and also did a staff compensation and set staffing, consistent staffing levels. So those are just a few examples of the sorts of kind of modernization efforts that we have seen in recent years. Session length and interims is a big one. We are hearing anecdotally from our part-time and hybrid legislatures that interims are getting busier and busier, which impacts both legislators and staff. And so that's something we get questions about quite often. With especially, in our part-time and our hybrid legislatures, if there are more interim meetings, it's pulling legislators away from their districts. And for those who have other jobs, that's a lot to juggle. And then for staff, the interim had traditionally been a quieter time. So you could do end of session wrap up, you could work on larger research projects, and take some time off since sessions, kind of prevent that. And so the busy interims is something that has been impacting a lot of legislatures. And the other thing we're seeing that I just want to touch on briefly is kind of the tracking of bill requests. And I should have also said amendment requests and limits on bill introductions. We have been hearing from some states that their drafting offices are really getting inundated by bill requests and amendment requests. In some states, it's as an effort to slow the process, but in other states, it's just, I think, a product that we have so much information at our fingertips these days, and so there's more ideas out there and more requests get submitted. They don't all get introduced, and therefore there have been some questions about our states monitoring the requests to really get an accurate reflection of the volume of work that drafting offices are experiencing. Okay, so back here to one of the main three pieces that I wanted to talk about. This is NCSL's, what we call our green, gray, gold map. So it's our part-time, full-time, and hybrid legislatures map. And in this map, you'll see the green states. Those are our full-time states. Over the years, through our surveying and research we have done, we have created these labels based on the amount of time that a legislator spends doing their legislative work, the number of staff, and the legislature compensation. So our dark green states, those are our states that have the highest compensation, the largest staffing numbers. And for all of our full-time states, we have an estimate that a full-time legislature is about 87% of a full-time job. The lighter green states, they're just a little bit smaller as far as like a little lower compensation and smaller staff sizes. The yellow states are our part-time states. A part-time we estimate is about 52% of a full-time job. The brighter yellow we designate as part-time light, which actually means they're getting closer to being a hybrid state, but they're not quite there. And then the vast majority of the states like Nevada are hybrid. And that's what you say in the gold. And so they're just in between being full-time and part-time, and it kind of varies widely within these states. There is a saying we have at NCSL that if you know one legislature, you know one legislature. And I certainly found that to be true. I started at NCSL about a year ago, having kind of cut my teeth, if you will, in this world with the Colorado Legislative Council's nonpartisan staff. And so most of my work had been done in Colorado, and been very surprised over this last year just how different states can be. And so this next slide is just a little bit of a way for me to illustrate that to you all. So I picked these 4 states as they're, kind of geographically in the same area as Nevada. But just a few things I want to highlight about each of them, just to kind of demonstrate the differences between states. I think, as you all know, Nevada is one of 4 states that's biennial, but you all really stand out because you're the only of those biennial states that has term limits. So that makes you all a little bit unique in that way. Like Colorado, like Nevada, has a 120-day session, but they are annual, also has term limits, very similar setup there. Colorado has about 300 staff and 100 legislators, so it's about a 3-to-1 ratio, whereas Nevada has about an 8-to-1 ratio of staff to legislators. So similarities there, but also differences. Both Colorado, actually all these states have more nonpartisan staff than partisan staff, except for Oregon. And we'll touch on that a little bit as we get down the line here. I wanted to share Arizona, also a hybrid state. Their session length is determined a little differently, but it's similar, but annual. But the thing that I wanted to share about Arizona that I thought could be interesting to you all is that Arizona also has a satellite office, just like Nevada does. So their satellite office is in Tucson. The other thing that's I thought was interesting is your ratio of staff to legislators is just about the same. I probably should have rounded up on this slide and just said 8-to-1 for Arizona, which is what you all have. Arizona has 100 plus more staff than you all, but have, what is it, about 27 more legislators. So I just thought that was interesting. I think it also could be an indication that when you have a satellite location, which only I think 2 other states, Alaska, and I forget the other one off the top of my head, but not very many states have that. But it brings staffing and security and just technology considerations that states that just have one central location don't have to consider and have to work with. I thought New Mexico might be interesting to you all. They're the only part-time state that I have on the list here, so they're different in that regard, but they're the thing that I wanted to highlight with New Mexico was that last year they budgeted to have a personal staff for each legislator for the first time. That has been new for their legislature. So they're a little bit lower on their ratio. They're a 5-to-1, about 5 staff per legislator. I will note that that number was before they brought on 1 personal staff per legislator. These staff are for their district offices. And the other thing that they budgeted for last year, and it's just come into effect this year, was some funding to have, I forget the exact number, but they do have some managers to help manage the personal staff that each legislator is hiring. So they figured that, if we're going to have this new personal staff component of our work, we need to have somebody to be able to manage that staff. So they did include some funding for a few management positions. And also more nonpartisan than partisan, but the personal staff will bring up their partisan numbers a little bit. And then lastly, I thought I would mention Oregon, partly because they were the last of the biennial states to transition to annual sessions. So they did that in 2011. They did it gradually. They they didn't just all one fell swoop go full on. You'll see part of that in that they have a longer 160-day session and then a shorter 35-day session. They are also unique in that they're the only of the states that I'm highlighting here that have more partisan staff than nonpartisan staff. Okay, so I am going to switch now and just talk a little bit about compensation. These figures that you see here for legislator annual compensation are from the survey we did in 2024. One of my staff, she does a survey every year. Even years, we just survey salary, per diem, and mileage reimbursement. And then in odd number of years, so in about a month, we'll be sending out another survey that's a little bit more robust and includes information, or we ask questions about other compensations such as benefits, retirement, etc. But these are the averages that from our salary survey last year. I wanted to note that, as you see by the asterisk, that there are 8 states, Nevada being one, that pays on a per day per month rather than on an annual basis. And so those 8 states aren't included in these numbers. And actually I caught, as I was going through my presentation just earlier today, and I wanted to share that number is dropped to 7 states as of 2025. I mentioned Kansas a little bit earlier. Part of their modernization work that they've been doing, they actually switched this year to an annual survey from a daily configuring salary on a daily basis. So for these numbers, there were 8 states that we didn't count because it's a little bit unpredictable for us to be able to know, how many days exactly do they get paid for. But I think they still give you, a really good indication of about what the averages are for full-time, hybrid, and part-time legislatures. Let me just take a breath here for a second and just see if there was anything else I wanted to. I did want to share that from our work last year in 2024, there were about 14 states where the legislators had salary increases. That increase ranged from about $1,000 to over $33,000. But one of the most interesting things that I was surprised by was there was actually one state, South Dakota, where the legislators actually received a decrease in salary. And that's because in South Dakota, they tie legislator salary, it's 1/5 of the state's median household income. And so their legislators had about a $1,300 decrease for this year that we're in now. And I think that's just a way to illustrate, you know, that compensation is figured in different ways in different states. This is just another basically way to view the information I just presented. You can see that most state salaries are the 20 to 60,000 range. I did forget or didn't say earlier, New Mexico legislators do not get a salary at all. So that is, you know, an interesting thing about New Mexico. They do get per diem, but not a salary. They are, as part of their modernization work that they're doing, creating a compensation commission. And then you'll see kind of the outliers, California, New York. Washington, D.C. is actually an NCSL member, not a state. So they're really an outlier, but do like to show that on some of our materials as well. And then this is just another way of looking at some of these trends from our surveys in the last 3 years. You can see that on average, legislator compensation has been pretty modest. Those percentages are pretty modest. You know, I just mentioned that New Mexico has formed a, they have actually, I spoke wrong. They are considering, as are you all, Haley shared that you do have a joint resolution that could create a compensation commission. New Mexico and Virginia both do as well in this 2025 session. It's interesting that, as you can see, the Oregon voters rejected the creating a compensation commission. And I did want to mention, I think I already mentioned that Kansas, part of their compensation commission's work was to go from a daily salary to an annual. And then Colorado has had a compensation commission that has changed their per diem rates for this session that we are in now. Previously, it was a set amount. If you were in the Denver metro area, you, as a legislator, received $45 per diem. And if you were outside of the metro area, it was $240. And the Compensation Commission has changed that. Now they're doing it on a percentage base. So it's going to be 25% if you're in the metro area, 90% if you're outside of the Denver metro area of the federal per diem rate, excuse me, for the city and county of Denver. This compensation commission is also going to look at the compensation of all the state elected officials. It's a 9-member commission, and they will make recommendations every 4 years. And just one last slide, just on a little bit more about compensation commissions. I think as from what I've already said, you're getting the feel that commissions can be created differently. They can be created by resolution or by a bill. They can be put to the voters, and the voters decide whether or not they think having a compensation commission for their state elected officials is a good idea or not. And then the authority of compensation commissions varies from state to state as well. From some of our more historical work, compensation commissions aren't a new thing, but we are seeing that the more newly formed commissions have more authority than they did, 20, 30 years ago. So in some states, Alaska and Hawaii, the findings of the compensation take effect unless the legislature passes a bill that says they do not want what the Compensation Commission decided. In Washington, they go into effect unless there is a referred petition filed. And some states just require the legislature to vote to accept. And in most, they either can accept or decrease, but cannot increase whatever the Compensation Commission's recommendations were. And then lastly, I just wanted to talk a little bit about constituent relationship management software. It is a topic that we are getting more and more questions about. I think, as we all know, in whether it's our work life or our personal life, the amount of information and the amount of communication that we receive is overwhelming. And, you all as legislators know the volume of emails, and now it's even texts that come into you from your constituents and from stakeholders. And so purchasing or developing software products that can help you as legislators manage this volume. So not only track and make sure things are responded to, but also have the ability to run reports is becoming increasingly popular. There is no one way, just like everything else in our legislative world. There's no single way that is best, or no single way that legislatures do this. Some legislatures, the software is purchased centrally. It's run by a central IT department, and all members of the legislature have it. In other legislatures, it might be purchased by the caucus or the chamber. And then there are instances where just individual legislators purchase it themselves, or even develop. And sometimes these CRMs, these constituent relationship management programs, are created in-house if the legislature has that capability. I mentioned AI just briefly earlier. I did just want to mention a little bit about AI in relation to CRM software. Some of the more sophisticated software programs are using AI, and what the AI is doing is you're all familiar, there's been a grassroots effort and you get 100 form letters, but they just came from different people, but the content is the same. The AI will recognize that, and then they can sort those for you, and you can see, okay, 100 of the identical letters came in on XYZ issue. The other thing that AI is doing with some of these software packages is it can tell if a bot actually created the communication that you've received. And, so that's just another way that it can help in sorting. We have heard from some states that some of these products are very expensive, and the IT offices or whoever would be managing it has made the determination that the return on investment isn't worth the investment in the software. But not all of these software packages are expensive, so there is a real range. And then, as you'll see from this slide, it's just an example of the way a few states and which programs that they are using. So, for example, these first three bullets are states that have it across the legislature. Michigan, I guess that's just the Michigan House is using IndiGov. Arkansas and Kentucky, they They've created their own customized system in-house. The New York Senate has an open source product, and I think you all will have the slides, and so that there is a link if you want to go look at their open source program, their Bluebird CRM. And then another just example I thought that was kind of fun to share with you all is that Massachusetts Senator Brownsberger, he has developed his own program. He's used WordPress. You can go take a look at that as well online. He's made that publicly available. And that is really all I had. I am happy to answer questions. I hope I didn't go too quickly through all of that. And I just know that we are here to help you all, whether it is something around the institution and operations or another subject area. Me and my team, we would always be happy to connect you to the correct person here at NCSL. Should you need, you have questions about something that you need answered and are hoping you can get some research on and not sure who to reach out to, please just keep my email there, and that is my office line, and feel free to reach out at any time. We are here to help you.
Thank you, Ms. George, for that very comprehensive presentation. Members, at this time, we will open it up for any questions. And I'll ask you, I had a quick one. You actually answered my question about CRM, so thank you. I just had a quick one regarding, is there a research authority on, who actually looks at effectiveness of state legislatures, or does NCSL, are you all the ones doing that, or is there anyone else that we could look to for research on what really is effective? Thank you.
I think that's a hard, thank you, Madam Chair, Julie George with NCSL. I think that's a hard one to answer because effectiveness, is kind of in the eye of the beholder. NCSL doesn't, we don't really give opinions on what we think, maybe this works better than that. I think I do have a resource, that I can get to you that just kind of touches on the different ways effectiveness is looked at. I can also work with one of my colleagues and then get back to you who that falls more into her expertise. But let me see what I can find in regards to that can help you kind of look at how you might measure effectiveness, or what does it really mean. And I do think it varies because one legislature might think number of bills means that they're effective, whereas another legislature, maybe they have different rules. And so the number of bills isn't a good measure on what's effective. So let me see what I can find for you, and I will get that to you through Haley.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate that.
My pleasure.
Okay, members, no other questions? Okay, well, thank you so much for joining us today. We found it very helpful.
Thank you. It was a pleasure to be here.
Thank you. And then next, we're going to move on to an overview of types of legislation presented by our committee policy analyst, Ms. Haley Prohl. And we thought this would be helpful as we will start hearing bills next week. For this committee, we hear different type of bills, so hopefully it's a helpful overview. When you're ready, Ms. Prohl, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. For the record, Haley Prohl, Committee Policy Analyst with the Research Division of the Legislative Council Bureau. Today I'm going to give a very brief overview of the different types of legislation that may be acted upon by the Nevada Legislature. The committees on legislative operations and elections are a bit unique compared to other committees in that they typically see a wider variety of measures, including joint resolutions and concurrent resolutions. And this is because, and I will go into more detail in a minute, these types of measures typically relate to legislative business. So the purpose of this presentation is to help explain the differences between the types of legislations that you may encounter in this committee, including the differences in their purposes and how they are enacted. So there is a one-pager that goes along with this presentation if you'd like to follow along. You should have a copy before you, and it's also posted on Nellis. All of you at this point have likely encountered a bill. This is the most common type of legislation. It proposes a new statute or proposes changes to an existing statute or several statutes. To become law, it must be passed by both houses of the legislature and signed by the governor. Another type of legislation is a joint resolution. Joint resolutions may propose to amend the Nevada Constitution, ratify an amendment to the United States Constitution, or request that the President, Congress, a federal agency, or members of Nevada's congressional delegation perform some act believed to be in the best interest of the state or nation. Joint resolutions are typically referred to the Committee on Legislative Operations and Elections. 8 of the 9 Assembly joint resolutions so far have been referred to this committee. For a joint resolution to take effect, it must be adopted by both houses of the legislature, but it does not require approval by the governor. However, if the joint resolution is proposing to amend the Nevada Constitution, it must be adopted by 2 consecutive legislatures in identical form and then approved by voters at the next general election before it takes effect. This process for legislatively referred constitutional amendments is governed by Article 16, Section 1 of the Nevada Constitution. Thus, this committee may see joint resolutions that are returning from the previous legislative session for a second consideration. Concurrent resolutions can serve many purposes, most of which relate to legislative business. Concurrent resolutions may adopt or amend the joint standing rules of the Senate and Assembly, express facts, principles, opinions, and purposes of the houses, establish joint committees of the 2 houses, direct the Legislative Commission to conduct interim studies, memorialize a former member of the legislature or other distinguished person upon death, resolve that the return of a bill from the other house is necessary and appropriate, or request the return of an enrolled bill from the governor. Similar to joint resolutions, concurrent resolutions need only to be adopted by both houses of the legislature to take effect. Depending on the nature of the concurrent resolution, it may be referred to a committee, or it may be adopted by voice vote on the floor without a committee referral. Concurrent resolutions expressing facts, principles, and opinions, or directing the Legislative Commission to conduct interim studies are usually referred to a committee, and that committee is usually the Committee on Legislative Operations and Elections. The final type of legislation is a one-house resolution. These are simply named Assembly Resolution X or Senate Resolution X. This type of legislation is adopted by either house, but only that house, to carry out legislative business similar to the types of the legislative business carried out by concurrent resolutions. However, a one-house resolution, as the name implies, only applies to one house. One-house resolutions are typically adopted by voice vote on the floor and never referred to a committee. However, they are typically sponsored by the Committee on Legislative Operations and Elections because of the nature of their contents. So that was a very brief overview of the different types of legislation. Thank you, Chair. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Pearl. Hopefully that was a helpful overview for everyone. And does anyone have any questions? Well, thank you. That answered some of my questions, so I appreciate you. And with that, we will now move on to public comment. Each person has 2 minutes to provide testimony, and I will be timing. Written public comment may also be submitted to the committee up to 24 hours after the meeting. As a reminder, when testifying, please turn on the microphone and clearly state your name and affiliation, if any, for the record. Then turn off the microphone each time you're done speaking. If you would like to provide public comment over the phone, please call 888-475-4499, and when prompted, enter the meeting ID 892-4491-4150, and then press pound. We'll start here in Carson City. Is anyone here to provide public comment? Seeing none, we'll go down to Las Vegas. Anyone in Las Vegas? And finally, thank you, AVH. Is there anyone on the phone lines wishing to give public comment?
Chair, the public line is open and working, but there are no callers choosing to provide public comment at this time.
Thank you so much. At this time, we will close public comment. Well, thank you so much, committee. We are excited that next week we will be getting to work even more. So our next meeting will be on Tuesday, February 25th at 4 p.m. And seeing no further business before us, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Chair.